You guys, if you think celebrity relationship drama is messy today, wait until you hear about one of the most iconic and unforgettable love triangles in pop culture history. This is one of those stories that feels almost too wild to be real. But somehow it happened, and people are still talking about it decades later. We're talking about Sebastian Bach, Christina Applegate, and Brad Pitt, and the now legendary drama that went down at the 1990 MTV Video Music Awards. Back then, the VMAs were not just another awards show. They were unpredictable, chaotic, glamorous, and full of the kind of celebrity energy that made anything feel possible. It was the perfect place for a scandal to be born. The atmosphere was loud, exciting, and completely different from the polished celebrity world we see now. If anything dramatic was going to happen in public, it was probably going to happen at the VMAs. And that's exactly what made this moment so unforgettable. At the center of it all was Christina Applegate, who at the time was already a major star. She was famous, beautiful, and one of the most talked about young actresses in Hollywood. Then there was Brad Pitt, who was still in the early stages of his rise. He hadn't yet become the massive global superstar we all know today, but he was clearly on his way. He was young, handsome, and quickly becoming one of Hollywood's most promising actors. And then there was Sebastian Bach, the lead singer of Skid Row, who brought an entirely different energy into the room. He was loud, rebellious, charismatic, and every bit the rock star fantasy of the early 90s. That combination alone was enough to make headlines. Christina Applegate and Brad Pitt were dating at the time, and from the outside, they looked like the kind of young celebrity couple people loved to obsess over. She was already established, he was the up-and-coming heartthrob, and together they had the kind of glamorous energy that naturally attracted attention. So when they showed up at the 1990 VMAs together, people noticed. Photographers noticed. Industry insiders noticed. Fans noticed. It was the kind of pairing that immediately got people talking. But what no one expected was that the night would take such a dramatic turn. According to the story that has followed all three of them ever since, Christina Applegate showed up to the VMAs with Brad Pitt, but by the end of the night, she apparently left with Sebastian Bach. The moment that story got out, the gossip world completely lost its mind. This wasn't just a small celebrity rumor. This instantly became one of the biggest and juiciest stories of that era. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. On one side, you had Brad Pitt, the rising actor who would later become one of the biggest movie stars in the world. On the other side, you had Sebastian Bach, a full-blown rock star with wild energy and a larger-than-life presence. And in the middle of it all was Christina Applegate, already famous and already powerful enough in the celebrity world to make a move like that feel absolutely explosive. It wasn't just gossip. It felt like a perfect snapshot of early 90s celebrity culture. The media frenzy that followed was exactly what you'd expect. Tabloids were obsessed. Fans started taking sides. Some people believed Christina had genuinely been swept away in the moment by Sebastian's rock star charm. Others thought she had simply gotten caught up in the excitement of the night. Some people even accused her of using Brad Pitt for attention before moving on to someone flashier. And of course, there were plenty of people who just couldn't stop focusing on Brad. Did he know what was happening? Was he blindsided? Was he embarrassed? Did he see the whole thing unfold in real time? The lack of clear answers only made the story even bigger. That's the thing about iconic celebrity gossip. If every detail is perfectly explained, people usually move on. But when there's mystery, speculation, and room for imagination, the story sticks around forever. And that's exactly what happened here. The details were never totally neat and simple, which allowed the moment to grow into something much bigger than just one awkward awards show interaction. It became pop culture folklore. What makes this story even more interesting is Sebastian Bach's more recent comments about what actually happened. After years of people retelling the story in different ways, Sebastian has finally opened up more about it, and his version adds a whole new layer to the drama. According to him, Christina Applegate made the first move. That detail alone changes the way a lot of people see the situation. For years, many assumed Sebastian, as the flashy rock star, had swooped in and stolen another man's girlfriend. But Sebastian's own telling makes it sound like he didn't go into the night trying to cause trouble. Instead, he describes it more like something that happened unexpectedly, and very quickly. He has said that he was young and stupid at the time, which honestly makes his version feel a lot more believable and human. He doesn't talk about it like some proud conquest, or some dramatic victory over Brad Pitt. Instead, he talks about it like he was caught up in a surreal moment that moved faster than he could process. That self-awareness is part of what makes his version so fascinating. He knows it was messy. He knows people still talk about it. And he seems to understand just how iconic and absurd the whole thing became. Sebastian has even described the situation like a fairy tale, which sounds dramatic, but when you think about it from his perspective, it kind of makes sense. He was a young rock star at one of the biggest entertainment events of the year, surrounded by fame, glamour, noise, and excitement. Then suddenly, one of the most beautiful and famous actresses in the room is showing interest in him. In that kind of environment, reality probably didn't feel very real at all. It probably felt like one of those larger-than-life celebrity moments where everyone is running on adrenaline and impulse. One of the most surprising things Sebastian has said is that he didn't even think Christina was that into him. That detail is honestly one of the juiciest parts of the whole story. For years, people treated this moment like Christina had made some huge emotional choice, like she had dramatically abandoned Brad Pitt, because she was irresistibly drawn to Sebastian Bach. But Sebastian's own reflection suggests something much less romantic and much more impulsive. He has basically admitted that even while it was happening, he didn't interpret it as the beginning of some deep or serious relationship. That changes the whole energy of the story. Instead of a clear-cut love triangle where one man wins and the other loses, it starts to feel more like a chaotic celebrity moment fueled by attraction, impulse, and the weird magic of fame. Maybe Christina was caught up in the excitement of the night. Maybe Sebastian was caught up in the attention. Maybe nobody was thinking long-term. That would explain why Sebastian has also said that he never really felt like he was in a serious relationship with her. He has described himself as just being along for the ride, and that phrase says a lot. When someone says they were just along for the ride, it usually means they weren't in control of the situation. They weren't planning it, they weren't thinking too deeply about it, and they definitely weren't treating it like some life-changing romance. That's what makes Sebastian's version feel so different from the tabloid version. The tabloids turned it into this big dramatic showdown, but Sebastian's own words make it sound like a brief, surreal, and impulsive moment that took on a life of its own. Another major detail that surprised people is that Sebastian says he never really saw Brad Pitt as a rival. That's interesting, because from the outside, the story naturally sounds like a rivalry. Two famous men, one famous woman, one public event, and a dramatic switch by the end of the night. On paper, it looks like a competition. But Sebastian insists that he didn't see it that way. He wasn't walking around thinking he was battling Brad Pitt or trying to win some kind of contest. He says he was just living in the moment and not framing it as some kind of showdown. That matters because celebrity gossip loves turning people into heroes and villains. It loves creating winners and losers, even when real life is usually much messy than that. Sebastian's perspective makes this feel less like a deliberate act of stealing someone's girlfriend, and more like a collision of youth, timing, attraction, and chaos. It doesn't make the situation any less dramatic, but it does make it feel more human. Then there's the part about Brad Pitt, which might actually be the most shocking detail of all. According to Sebastian, Brad handled the entire situation like a total pro. And honestly, that says a lot. If you imagine yourself showing up at a major public event with your girlfriend, only to have the night turn into one of the most talked about celebrity gossip stories of the decade, most people would assume there would be anger, confrontation, or at least some obvious tension. But Sebastian has said that Brad handled it with class, and he has spoken very respectfully about him ever since. That detail actually makes Brad look even cooler in hindsight. Instead of being remembered as the guy who caused a scene or lost control, he's remembered as the one who stayed composed. That kind of reaction only adds to the legend of the story, because it keeps the whole thing from feeling ugly. It stays in that strange space where it's messy and awkward, but still glamorous enough to remain iconic instead of tragic. Of course, one of the biggest questions people still ask is whether Christina Applegate actually played Sebastian Bach. Because if you listen to how Sebastian talks about it now, there's definitely an undercurrent of him realizing that maybe he misunderstood the situation. He's admitted that he didn't think she was deeply invested. He's admitted he was just going with the flow. And he's admitted that he didn't really see the whole thing as a serious relationship. So it's fair for people to wonder whether Sebastian was just a thrill in the moment, the exciting rock star detour in the middle of one wild VMA night. A lot of people think that's exactly what happened. And to be fair, that interpretation makes sense. Sebastian and Christina didn't go on to become one of those great long-term celebrity couples. Their connection didn't turn into some legendary romance. It was brief, intense, highly memorable, and over almost as quickly as it started. That's part of why this story remains so fascinating. It was huge in the moment and then suddenly gone. Like fireworks. Bright, loud, impossible to ignore, and then over before anyone fully understood what they had just seen. So when people say Sebastian may have gotten played, what they usually mean is this: did he mistake a spontaneous, exciting, highly public celebrity moment for something deeper than it actually was? And based on his own reflections, even he seems to think that might be true. Not in a bitter way, not in an angry way, but in a very self-aware, almost amused way. Like he can now look back and laugh at how young, flattered, and caught up he was. That honesty is a huge part of why people are still so interested in his version of the story. He's not trying to turn himself into some macho winner. He's not bragging about taking Brad Pitt's girl. He's not acting like it was some great romantic victory. If anything, he makes himself sound vulnerable, confused, and a little overwhelmed by the whole thing. And weirdly enough, that makes the story even better, because it feels more real. So why does this love triangle still matter after all these years? Why does this one celebrity gossip story keep getting brought up, when so many others have faded away? The answer is simple. It perfectly captures a kind of celebrity magic that barely exists anymore. It's messy, but not dark. It's dramatic, but not tragic. It's scandalous, but in a way that feels almost playful and surreal in hindsight. It involves huge names, but before they became untouchable icons. It happened in public, but still has just enough mystery to keep people guessing. And most of all, it feels like such a perfect product of its time. You have Christina Applegate at the center, confident and glamorous. You have Brad Pitt before he became one of the biggest movie stars on earth. And you have Sebastian Bach in full rock star mode, getting pulled into a moment that would follow him for decades. It's almost too perfect. If someone wrote it into a movie, people would probably say it was unrealistic. But because it really happened, or at least happened closely enough to become accepted pop culture history, it has that rare larger-than-life quality that keeps it alive. Sebastian's more recent comments have only made the story more interesting, because they add reflection and perspective. Now it's not just a rumor people repeat. Now it's a memory being revisited by one of the people who actually lived it. And what he seems to be saying, more than anything, is that the moment became much bigger than the reality. The actual relationship, if you can even call it that, didn't last. It wasn't some epic romance. It was short-lived, confusing, exciting, and over quickly. But the story itself became immortal. That might actually be the funniest part of all. The relationship didn't last, but the gossip did. That one VMA night came and went, but the legend never really ended. It's still one of those celebrity stories people bring up whenever they want to talk about wild 90s Hollywood moments. And every time it gets retold, it somehow still feels just as juicy. When Sebastian looks back on it now, he doesn't really sound full of regret, but he doesn't sound like he's bragging either. It feels more like amused disbelief. Like he knows he was part of something absurdly iconic, even if it didn't mean nearly as much in real life as people imagined. He seems to understand that the story became larger than the actual emotions involved. And in a weird way, he seems grateful for that. He's even suggested that he's glad he got to be part of such an unforgettable celebrity moment. And honestly, that might be the healthiest way to look at it. Instead of trying to turn it into some dramatic moral lesson, or some huge romance, he seems to accept it for what it was: a crazy chapter, a wild memory, and a bizarre piece of Hollywood history that somehow became part of pop culture forever. So what really happened? The most likely truth is probably much simpler than the legend. Christina Applegate was dating Brad Pitt. They went to the 1990 VMAs together. Somewhere during that wild night, Christina connected with Sebastian Bach. According to Sebastian, she made the first move. He got caught up in the excitement. He was young, flattered, and not thinking too much about consequences. He didn't see Brad as a rival. He didn't even think Christina was necessarily that into him in a serious way. Brad, meanwhile, handled the whole situation with way more class than most people probably would have. And whatever happened between Christina and Sebastian after that was short-lived. But the story? The story became legendary. And that's why people still talk about it. Because sometimes the moment matters more than the relationship. Sometimes the gossip outlives the romance. Sometimes one impulsive decision at one awards show becomes the kind of pop culture story that never really dies. And honestly, that's exactly what happened here. So now the real question is the one people still debate to this day. Did Sebastian Bach get played by Christina Applegate? Or was he just living his absolute best rock star life in one of the most unforgettable celebrity moments of the 90s? Truthfully, it might be both. Maybe Christina was chasing a thrill. Maybe Sebastian was chasing a fantasy. Maybe Brad Pitt was just caught in the middle of one very chaotic, very public night. And maybe that's exactly why this story still works so well all these years later. Because it isn't neat, it isn't simple, and it definitely isn't boring. It's glamorous, messy, awkward, impulsive, and totally unforgettable. Exactly the kind of celebrity tea that never goes out of style.